Alright. Shalom, shalom, my friends. Welcome in, fishes and detectives alike. I'm Desert Mermaid, and welcome to the Early Tide. Feel free to get settled in, put your fins up, come listen and enjoy to a Nancy Drew mystery book. I know I've been off for a minute, and that's because I've been pure chaos. I just get so cozy in bed. But anyways, we are continuing Nancy Drew mystery story number 16, The Clue of the Tapping Heels. We're going to be on chapter 9. I am going to be on here a short time due to a busy day. But so far, we have learned that there is a secret room, but a potential suspect has escaped basically a psych hospital, and they're just trying to figure out what's going on. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Chapter 9, Suspicious Salesman. As Nancy hurried to the open attic window, she wondered if someone might be clinging to the sill and trying to hide. There were no figures showing, and cautiously she looked out. "See anything?" Mr. Drew asked, joining her. "Nobody in sight," Nancy replied. "But, Dad, look! Here's a natural ladder." She pointed to a stout trellis which ran from the ground to the roof. "A lot of those leaves have been torn off," Nancy said. "I guess the intruder came up this way." "He's still a human fly," her father remarked. "The man could have fallen and broken his neck. He must be mighty sure of himself to have attempted such a climb." A thought came to Nancy's mind. "Dad, it never occurred to me to look for a trellis at Miss Carter's. Maybe the tapper gets into her attic that way." "Let me know what you find," the lawyer said. Before leaving for his office, Mr. Drew decided to board up the attic window. He found a piece of wood in the garage and soon had it in place. "I'm glad you did that instead of ripping the vines off the house," Nancy said as they ate breakfast. "The ivy looked so pretty." Later, as she was clearing the table, Nancy realized that actually she was not very safe from her pursuer. Despite all her precautions, he knew she had brought the diary home. That meant the tapper, or someone else who slept in the secret room, had discovered that the diary was missing. "I still have that cupboard key in my purse," Nancy reminded herself. "Someone may try to snatch it." She decided to put the key on a ribbon and hang it around her neck. An hour later, with warnings from her father still ringing in her ears, Nancy drove away. She locked herself in the convertible and turned on the air conditioner. As she rode along, Nancy began to feel easier. No one seemed to be following her. Upon arriving at Miss Carter's, Nancy parked the car in the driveway and then walked all the way around the house. No vines were growing on it, and there was nothing else to which a person might cling in order to climb any of the walls. "Well, there goes my theory about the human fly," she thought. "But how does that tapper get into the house?" She found Miss Carter and Hannah grown very upset. "5 more cats have been stolen during the night." "The garage was securely locked," the actress said. "Someone has a skeleton key." "That's sure. I must have a padlock put on the door. Fortunately, my little beauties that are to go to the show had been brought into the house." I wanted to help with the grooming, so they weren't taken. Did you call the police? Nancy asked. Oh, yes, Miss Carter answered. Detective Keeley came. He made a thorough search of the grounds and came up with one good clue. What was that? The thief was a short, stocky man who wore spiked golf shoes. There were holes in the ground outside the garage, but not inside it. Miss Carter went on. Maybe the thief took off his shoes before he went in for the cats, but in any case, you couldn't detect the marks in the hay. Nancy asked where the footprints led, and learned they crossed the neighbor's backyard and went out to the street. The conversation was interrupted by the ringing of the doorbell. Nancy offered to go downstairs and answer it. To her surprise, Bess and George stood there. They had borrowed the Marvin car. Hi, they both said. And Bess added, You didn't expect us to get back in time for the cat show, did you? George grinned. What's more, we just couldn't stay away from the mystery any longer. We didn't pick up any clues, though, to Gus Woonton. Girls, said Nancy, the cat thief was here last night and took 5 more Persians. Oh no, Bess cried out. See what happens when we're not here to guard the garage, George remarked. Bess looked sober. Hesitatingly, she confessed that on the drive to Bearville, she had told George she would not sleep in the garage another night. But I guess I'll have to change my mind, Bess said. I'm terribly sorry to hear about the theft. Fortunately, the cats to be sold at the cat show today were in the house, Nancy told her chums. The 3 girls went upstairs. I'm delighted you're back, said Miss Carter. Upon learning that the cousins would take up their vigil in the garage that evening, she added, You're dolls, both of you. Presently, Nancy said, I suppose we should start soon for the cat show. How many miles is it to South Bedford, Miss Carter? I'd say about 20. Hannah grew and offered to pack a lunch for the girls and went down to the kitchen. During the next hour, Miss Carter directed the preparations for the trip to the show. 5 carrying cases were brought into the house. Brushes, eyewash, a bottle of delicately perfumed spray, and cans of cat food were packed in a large tote bag. George placed the bag in Nancy's car, and also a sack of kitty litter. And don't forget to take a jug of water and a dish, Miss Carter said. Oh dear, I wish so much that I might be there. I hope you have no trouble selling the cats, because I really need the money. Oh yes, one more thing. Be sure to put in several paper hankies so you can keep my cat's mouth and feet immaculately clean. Out of sight of Miss Carter, George grinned and whispered to the others, We always have cats at my house. They certainly never get all this attention. They keep themselves groomed. Bess giggled. Mine do too. But then, you and I aren't in the business of selling cats. Correction, said George. Today we are. By this time the girls' lunch was ready. It was put into the car, and with wishes of good luck from Hannah, Nancy and the cousins rode off. When they reached the South Bedford Municipal Auditorium where the cat show was being held, the girls carried the Persians inside. Nancy stopped at the desk to claim the booth Miss Carter had reserved. You have number 10, the man told Nancy. As you enter, keep to your right. You'll find it easily. As soon as the cages had been set in place and doors between them opened so the cats might roam around, the girls tacked up a large sign to an overhead beam. It read, Carter's Cats. Lovable, companionable, decorative, purebred Persians. Visitors to the show began to stop and admire Miss Carter's cats. They're perfectly beautiful, one woman exclaimed. I wish I could buy one, but I travel a great deal and couldn't take care of it. A couple stopped. The woman said to the man, Oh, Claude, dear, I'd love to have one of these. What do you say? Nothing doing, he answered rather roughly. Those long-haired cats get hairs all over the place. He took the woman's arm and pulled her away from the booth. Bess sighed. At this rate, maybe we'll have to take all these cats back home. Don't be discouraged, Nancy said. We've been here only 15 minutes. At that moment, 3 judges, 2 women and a man, walked up and carefully examined Miss Carter's Persians. A few moments later, they went off to confer, then returned smiling. One of the women placed the Best in Show ribbon on Agatha's cage. How wonderful! Bess exclaimed. The other woman put a first place blue ribbon on Rosamond. All the other cats received second place red rewards. Congratulations, said the third judge. I'm sorry Miss Carter couldn't be here. Give her my regards. I'm Craig Kendall. I will, said Nancy. This will make her very happy. After the judges walked away, George suggested the price of the cats be raised, with Agatha having the highest amount. Nancy and Bess agreed. Many passer-by stopped to praise the beauty of the Persians. One woman asked the price of each. Nancy told her. Oh, she said, that's rather high, isn't it? A man on the other side of the show is selling Persians much cheaper. The 3 girls were interested and a trifle suspicious. George asked the number of the seller's booth. It's number 30, the woman replied. I remember because I told the man I might be back. George told Nancy and Bess she was going over to see the Persian cats and hurried off. When she returned several minutes later, George was very excited. Girls, she exclaimed, I'm sure that the 5 Persian cats in booth 30 are some that were stolen from Miss Carter. Chapter 10, Precarious Clown. Halfway through the book. At George's announcement, Nancy and Bess caught their breath. They were sure George was right and decided to look at the Persian cats. I found out, she went on, that the man had 10, but he has sold 5. Nancy, said Bess, you go with George. I'll stay here with our cats. The other 2 hurried off, but as they neared booth 30, Nancy held George back. Don't you think it would be better if we pretend to be strolling casually and stop to look at the cats? I suppose you're right, George agreed. The girls slowed to a leisurely pace. As they passed the booth, Nancy was sure the cats were Miss Carter's stolen Persians. They looked exactly the same as the ones the girls were selling. Nancy studied the man who was in charge. He was short and rather stocky. Was he the one who had worn the spiked golf shoes? George spoke to the man. There are some beautiful cats here. I saw them a few minutes ago and went to get my friend. She's crazy about Persians. Yes, I am, said Nancy. She asked for the price. When he named it, she said, Why, that's cheap for such fine animals. They're pedigreed, of course. Oh, sure, the man replied. Do you have the pedigree papers with you? Nancy asked. The man hesitated for a few seconds, then said, They're here someplace. You buy one of the cats and leave your name and address. I'll send you the pedigree later. Nancy smiled at him. But I want to see the pedigree before I buy. The man's attitude changed. If you don't want to buy on my say-so, don't, he said. Next customer. He turned away from the girls ignoring them completely. They walked off. Nancy, what do you think? George asked. I strongly suspect he's a phony. It wouldn't hurt to call the police. If the man has nothing to hide, he won't be in trouble. But if he's a thief. Nancy stopped at a nearby phone booth and put in the call. The sergeant on duty said 2 men would be sent to the cat show at once. He instructed Nancy to wait for them at the Carter booth, so she would go with the officers to point out the suspect. I wonder if Bess sold any cats, said George as the girls went on. As they neared booth 10, they saw only 4 cats. Bess greeted them with a giggle. Want to know who the real salesman is around here? She asked, thumping her chest. Congratulations, said Nancy. Then she told Bess about the man in booth 30 and said the police would be arriving in a few minutes to talk to him. Bess gave Nancy a long look and shook her head. Everywhere you go, there's excitement. Nancy laughed. This may not end up being exciting at all. Here come 2 men now. I wonder if they're plainclothesmen from the police department or potential customers. The men stopped at the booth. Miss Drew, one of them asked. When Nancy acknowledged her identity, the 2 men opened their coats and showed police detective badges. They requested her to point out the suspect to them. Bess asked to go along. George, see if you can sell a cat while I'm gone, she teased. Nancy led the way toward booth 30. As they approached it, she gasped. The man and all the cats were gone. He isn't here, she exclaimed, embarrassed. The group stood in front of the empty booth, mystified. Nancy was sure that the detectives felt that a hoax had been pulled on them. Are you sure this is the right place? One of them asked Nancy. Oh, yes. Now listen, young lady, the other officer said. Don't you know it's a serious offense to bring out the police on a wild goose chase like this? Bess was aghast. She said quickly, Nancy has done nothing wrong. She's an amateur detective, and we've been trying to trace cats that were stolen from a woman we know. Her name's Carter. The taller of the 2 men looked at Nancy. Amateur detective, eh? He scoffed. Well, if there's one thing in this world I have no use for, it's an amateur detective. Oof. Nancy was stung by the remark. Somehow she must prove to these men that she was not faking. She saw a woman in booth 31 who was busy grooming some Maltese cats. She dashed over and touched her arm. Pardon me, but could you tell us where the man went who had the cats in booth 30? I can't tell you where he went, the woman answered. I can tell you this. After you and the other young lady left here, he began to act strange. He mumbled to himself and then called out to passerbys, Want to buy a cat cheap? The price was so ridiculous, he sold them all in a couple of minutes. Then he rushed out of here as if a cyclone were chasing him. Nancy was so appreciative of the woman's assistance she could have kissed her, but she merely said, I suspect that the cats the man was selling have been stolen from a home where I'm staying. I called the police, and here are 2 detectives. They doubted my story, so I'm very grateful to you for helping me out. The woman turned to the detectives. Everything I just said is true. Besides, I can easily believe that the man is a thief. He acted very odd right from the beginning, shifty-eyed and sort of scared, and wouldn't let the judges look at his Persians. Even the cats didn't seem to like him. He was having a hard time with them. The taller detective turned to Nancy. I'm sorry, I thought you were kidding us. Then he quickly defended himself. The police get so many funny calls, I guess we're kind of rough on people sometimes. He then asked for a full description of the suspect. The woman in booth 31 gave a clear picture of the man. Short and kind of stocky. He walked with quick steps. As I said, he was shifty-eyed and acted nervous. He had dark hair and eyes. I guess that's all I can tell you about him. The detective said she had been a great help and they would try to locate the man. The detective said goodbye to everyone and left. After Nancy had thanked the woman again, She and Bess hurried back to their own booth. I'm sorry I didn't get a look at that man's Persian cats, Bess said. He probably took the list of the purchasers, so there's no chance of tracking him or the cats. I'm afraid not, Nancy agreed. Let's just hope they found good homes. The girls were delighted that George had sold 2 cats, and within a few minutes Nancy sold 1. By now the crowd had dwindled, and it was approaching closing time. Oh dear, said Bess. Do you suppose we'll have to take Agatha back home? Miss Carter needs the money, and will be disappointed that we didn't sell all the Persians. Should we lower the price? I don't want to do that, said Nancy. She took the Persian from his cage and fondled the fluffy animal. Maybe her gesture would appeal to some prospective buyer. Among the people who stopped at the booth was a little boy. His pockets were stuffed with boxes of popcorn and candy. In one hand he carried a curled up paper whistle. He walked close to the cat and gave a great blow on the whistle. Not only did it make a loud noise, but the curl up section flew out at the little animal and hit it in the face. Oh, you naughty boy, Nancy cried as the cat leaped from her arms. To her dismay, it scooted up a post and onto cross beams. She turned toward the cat and held up one hand. Don't be frightened, she said soothingly. I won't let him do it again. Please come down. The cat paid no attention, so Nancy climbed up on a chair and reached for it. But the cat scooted farther away and climbed high onto a rafter of the auditorium. Oh dear, said Bess. What are we going to do now? Nancy continued to cajole the Persian to climb down, but without success. Bess and George tried persuading the cat to come back, but they had no luck either. There's only one thing left to do, said Nancy. I'm glad I wore pants. She caught the beam above, hoisted herself onto it, and walked along it to the rafter. Then she began climbing toward the cat. Oh, Nancy, wailed Bess. That's too dangerous. The cat isn't worth it. Please come back. Nancy assured Bess she would be all right and continued to climb. Onlookers began to gather and offer all kinds of advice. Most of the men urged Nancy to go on, but to be careful. The woman begged her to come down. Bess had turned her back on the scene. She was ashen. Her lips were moving, and George assumed she was praying for Nancy's safe return. The cat watched Nancy from a high beam. As the girl finally reached the beam on which the animal stood, she straddled it and started to inch her way along. Come, pussy, she coaxed. Nobody's going to hurt you. The cat waited a moment. Then, instead of coming toward Nancy, it went the other way. Oh, you meanie, Nancy exclaimed. The crowd below watched tensely. Finally, one of the men called to her. Hang on, I'll toss the net up, and you can catch the animal that way. The man dashed off. He came back in a couple of minutes with a fish net, which he threw upward. It did not reach the beam. Once more he gave the net a mighty heave. Still, it did not reach Nancy. I guess it's no use, she called down. A very tall man among the onlookers offered to try his luck. He rolled the net into a ball and gave a mighty heave. Nancy reached down to grab the net and caught it. But the weight of the net and her sudden shift in position caused Nancy to lose her balance. All right. Chapter 11, Bess Plays Cupid. Due to the short nature of this stream, I am letting you know that I will be reading this as my last chapter. As Nancy slipped from the high beam, people below gasped. Others screamed. Oh, no, no, George cried. Nancy herself had been terrified for a fraction of a second. In a desperate attempt to save herself, she clung tightly to the beam by one arm. Then, with great effort, she swung her right leg over the beam and gradually pulled herself to an upright position. "Bravo! Bravo!" cried several of the men below her and began to clap. "Yeah! Yeah!" shouted several relieved children. All this time, Nancy had managed to hold on to the net. Now she unrolled it and, with a well-placed aim, finally snared the Persian. Its protest at being made a prisoner almost caused Nancy to lose her balance again. There were gasps of dismay from the watching crowd, and a flashbulb went off. Nancy looked down. A photographer had snapped her picture. "Oh dear," she thought. "This whole adventure has been such a mess." The cat had quieted down, and now Nancy inched her way backward, pulling the animal along. Slowly she shinned down the rafter to the crossbeam. "Bess, George, will you catch the cat?" Nancy requested. "Yes, let it go," George replied. Besides the girl's outstretched arms, there were several other willing hands. Nancy dropped the net containing the animal. The Persian was immediately put back into its cage, and Nancy came down the rest of the way safely. The watchers showered her with congratulations. "Thanks a lot," she said, blushing. All she wanted to do now was to get back to Berryville. A voice from among the onlookers called out, "I'll buy the cat. I like spunky animals. How much is it?" Before Nancy could answer, George spoke up. "The price is higher now." People laughed, and the man called out, "You mean the higher the cat, the higher the price?" "Exactly," George said. "How about our having an auction? We'll start with the original price and go up from there." Nancy was amused and wondered if the scheme would work. "I'll pay exactly the figure you named," a woman said. "And I'll give you $25 more," a man called out. "Anyone bid 25 more, 25 more?" said George, who began to enjoy her role as auctioneer. As the bidding went on, Nancy and Bess became more and more astounded. The Persian cat finally sold for over 3 times what the original price had been. When Nancy mentioned to Bess that she wondered if this had been the right thing to do, her chum said quickly, "I thought all along the price for a prize cat was too low. Besides, Miss Carter can certainly use the money." The girls said goodbye to the lovely Persian, which was now resting comfortably in the arms of a teenage girl whose father had purchased it for her. She smiled at the girls. "I just love my new pet." "I'm so glad you do," Nancy said. "Be kind to Abatha." At that moment, the young man who had taken their picture said, "I want it for our local paper. Quite a story. Please tell me your name and address." Nancy did not relish this publicity, but did not see how she could avoid it. She identified herself. "You're from River Heights?" the photographer asked. "Are you related to the famous lawyer Carson Drew?" Bess answered the question. "She certainly is, and she does a lot of detective work in connection with her father's cases." Nancy was embarrassed, but the photographer beamed. "This will make a cool story," he said, putting away his notebook and starting off. "I can't wait to get it in the paper." When the girls reached Miss Carter's home, they found that Mrs. Beeling had returned from River Heights. At once she said to Nancy, "I hope you're not too tired to drive me downtown. I must buy some food." Nancy said she would be glad to take the nurse as soon as she had a chance to freshen up and change her clothes. The 3 girls went upstairs to Miss Carter's room. Hannah Gruen was talking to the actress. Proudly, Nancy opened her purse and took out a large wad of bills. "We sold every cat," she announced. "That's marvelous!" Miss Carter exclaimed. "You girls are wonderful. Why, Nancy, you've given me too much money." The 3 salesmen giggled. "No, I haven't," Nancy said. and then told the story of George auctioning off the last cat. Both women laughed. Good work, said Hannah. Bess spoke up. It was all because Nancy climbed in the rafters to get the cat, and twice she nearly fell off. Oh my goodness, Hannah Gruen cried out. Nancy smiled. Don't worry, I'm still in one piece. Miss Carter shook her head. I appreciate all this, she said, but Nancy, you shouldn't have taken the chance. Then she chuckled. You must be as lithe as a kitten yourself. While Bess and George told her about the strange man with the cats at the show, Nancy took a quick shower and changed her clothes. Then she and Mrs. Veeling set off for the shopping center of Berryville. As they entered the parking lot, the nurse suddenly exclaimed, Nancy, there's a man who was looking for Miss Violet. Where? Mrs. Veeling pointed him out. He had parked his red convertible and was now hurrying out to Main Street. Nancy dashed after the tall, handsome man and in a few moments caught up to him. Pardon me, she said, walking beside him, but are you Mr. Toby Simpson? He looked at her in amazement, then said with a smile, Yes, I am. You don't know me, Nancy said. My name is Nancy Drew, and I'm staying with the woman you call Miss Violet. The actor stopped walking and stared at Nancy. But how did you know? I don't blame you for being surprised, Nancy said, then quickly explained that Miss Carter had found out he had come to the house asking for Miss Violet. By the time Mrs. Beeling had caught up to them and Nancy introduced her, the actor smiled. You're the woman who came to the door when I rang and said Miss Violet did not live there. That's right, I never heard Miss Carter's stage name. Mr. Simpson said that back in the days when he had been in plays with her, she had insisted that no one called her by any name except Miss Violet. He had assumed that she had continued the custom. An idea came to Nancy. She said to the actor, If you're not busy this evening, I think it would be fun if you come to dinner at the house. We could let it be a complete surprise to Miss Carter. The man's eyes lighted up. I can't think of anything I'd rather do, he replied. What time would you like me to get there? Would 7 o'clock be all right? It occurred to Nancy that even if they had a simple dinner, not much time was being allowed for its preparation. 7 o'clock will be fine. I'll be there. And thank you very much. Then goodbye for now, said Nancy. She and Mrs. Beeling hurried off to the market. This is very exciting, the nurse said. Now all we need is to have the Tapper show up and spoil the show. I can't understand why the police haven't rounded up somebody in this case. Well, what do you think we should have for dinner? Steak is always safe, Nancy replied. And how about a lemon meringue pie? I'll telephone Hannah and ask if she'll make one right away. She dashed off to a street phone while Mrs. Beeling started to shop. It was nearly 6 o'clock by the time they reached home. Bess, intrigued by the thought of a romantic meeting between Miss Violet and Toby Simpson, found it hard not to give away the secret. She and George had set the table. Flowers and candles gave it a very festive air. Hannah Gruen was just putting the meringue on the pie. She had also made a tasty-looking tossed salad with tomatoes and cucumbers. We'll start with melon, Nancy announced. Then will come the steak, french fries, and string beans. Everybody can help prepare them for cooking. Bess had gone upstairs and suggested that Miss Carter wear one of her most becoming dresses. And I'll comb your hair in a modern style, she offered. What's going on? The actress asked, a suspicious look coming to her eyes. Bess did not answer directly. She said, Don't you think we should celebrate selling all those cats and Nancy rescuing the last one? Miss Carter smiled. I suppose we should. She pointed out a filmy pale blue dress, and Bess helped her put it on. You look darling, the girl said. Then she started working on the actress's fluffy gray hair. Within a few minutes, Miss Carter's long hair was arranged in an attractive style. As she looked in the mirror, the woman smiled. I do look lovely, don't I? A faraway expression came over her face. Like I used to be when I played in The Dancer and the Fool. Presently, George came upstairs, and together the two girls carried Miss Carter to the first floor. They had dimmed the lights in the dining room so she would not notice the extra place at the table. The girls sat down in the living room with her, while Mrs. Beeling and Hannah Gruen were putting the finishing touches on the meal. At exactly 7 o'clock, the front doorbell rang. Nancy went to answer, followed by Bess and George. They had already decided that the meeting between Miss Carter and Mr. Simpson should take place alone in the living room. When Nancy opened the door, she put one finger to her lips and merely said, "Won't you come in?" Mr. Simpson, smiling, stepped into the hall. Nancy pointed out the doorway to go to the living room and motioned for him to go inside. The girls huddled together, waiting. The next moment they heard a cry of delight from Miss Violet. "Toby, Toby, you've come back to me!" "Yes, dear. It has been so many years. I lost complete track of you, but today I had a little luck. And thanks to your friend Nancy Drew, here I am." There was a long silence, and the girls figured the couple were having a loving embrace. A few minutes later, Miss Carter called the girls inside. She formally introduced Mr. Simpson, then asked for a complete explanation of the whole affair. Nancy quickly told the story, then the three girls said they must go out to the kitchen to help. On the way, Bess whispered excitedly, "I'm so happy I could burst." "I feel pretty good about the whole thing myself," George said. When the girls entered the kitchen, Hannah and Mrs. Beeling wanted to know about the meeting between the actress and actor. When they heard it had been a happy one, both were pleased. A little later, when everyone was seated at the table and grace had been said, Miss Carter told the others a little about her early life on the stage. "Then finally I played opposite Toby and we began to date," she explained. The actor had not taken his eyes from the woman, and now he said, "I played the part of the fool in the story for so long, I guess I just lived the part in my everyday life. In any case, I was a fool to think my work was more important than marrying my leading lady." Bess had been touched by the story in the meeting. Now she looked directly at the couple and said, "It's not too late." Her remark was so unexpected that there was dead silence for several seconds. Bess, embarrassed, apologized profusely, but Toby smiled at her gratefully. "You have said the very thing I wanted to," he told her, and looked lovingly at Miss Carter. "As soon as you are well again, but say we try it." Everyone waited anxiously for an answer. Taking Toby Simpson's hand and kissing him on the cheek, she said, "I'll try it if you think I can be of help to you." "Oh, you can." Now there was real rejoicing. Everyone was so excited it was hard to settle down to the dinner in front of them. But after a while, the conversation got around to the reason Nancy and her friends had come to Miss Carter's house. Toby Simpson wanted to hear the story in detail. When Nancy revealed the fact that she suspected a young man named Gus Woonton, Mr. Simpson frowned. "I once met a couple named Woonton," he said. "I believe they had a son, Gus." Thank you so much. Okay, chapter 12. Try to catch me. All right. Thank you so much for coming today for this short time that we followed the tide into this. It was exciting to read some love happening, some, as in romance, a cat auction, and now leaving it on a cliffhanger. Sometimes the tide is just like that. Things could be calm and mellow, or they can go out and drift us off to nowhere. Either way, happy Saturday. I hope the rest of your weekend goes well. And until next time, thanks for swimming on by. I'm Desert Mermaid, and feel free to give me a follow here. And until next time, like I said, catch the waves.